The committee will come to order. The chairman notes the presence of a quorum, which under Committee Rule 3E is 2 members. The Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources is meeting today to hear testimony on an oversight hearing titled Lotta Shakin, an examination of America's earthquake early warning system development and implementation. Under Committee Rule 4F, opening statements are limited to the chairman and ranking member of the subcommittee. However, I ask unanimous consent to include any other members' opening statements in the hearing record if submitted to the clerk by close of business today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a statement by Core First, a developer of seismic mitigation approach for unreinforced masonry buildings. Hearing no objection, so ordered. And then after I speak, we will recognize the ranking member of the full committee. As always, the ranking member and the chairman are always welcome to attend subcommittee hearings and are given deference when they are able to attend. I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. In March, we held a hearing on the 50th anniversary of the Good Friday Great Alaska Earthquake to look at advances in earthquake science over the ensuing half-century. The Great Alaska Earthquake was a massive 9.2 magnitude quake, making it the second largest earthquake ever recorded with modern seismic equipment, and the largest in the U.S. As a result, it is one of the most studied natural disasters in history. Today, the committee will focus on the development and implementation of an earthquake early warning system for the western United States. You might be surprised to learn that an earthquake early warning system was proposed for San Francisco back in 1868. The suggestion that as shaking occurred in Hollister, California, a telegram could be sent to City Hall in San Francisco, where an alarm, bells, could be rung to alert residents that imminent shaking was about to start so that they might take measures to protect themselves. Hollister is about 74 miles southeast of San Francisco. Even back in the 1860s, scientists knew that an electric signal transmits more quickly than seismic waves caused by an earthquake. It's during the lag time between the reception of a signal and the impact of the seismic waves that allows early warning, giving anywhere from a few seconds to minutes for people to take cover, stop or slow trains, halt elevators, open firehouse doors, and other steps to prepare for the effects of sustained shaking. Even though the understanding of earthquake early warning has been around, America has not implemented a large-scale earthquake early warning system. More than 100 years after Mr. Cooper first suggested an earthquake early warning system for the Bay Area, T.H. Heaton, a geoscientist with the USGS, proposed a seismic computerized network for Southern California. However, it wasn't until 1994 that an early earthquake warning system was implemented in parts of Southern California to deal with the aftershocks of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. The system was similar to Cooper's vision, but relied on the benefit of modern technology. In 1994, Mexico had already implemented an earthquake early warning system for Mexico City, which had suffered through a devastating earthquake in 1985 that killed more than 10,000 people. This system recently provided Mexico City more than a minute warning in advance of the April 18th 7.2 magnitude Guerrero, Mexico quake. Japan is the only country that has a nationwide earthquake early warning system. The system allowed the Japanese transit system to shut down every train so that not a single derailment occurred as a result of the great 9.0 magnitude Honshu quake in 2011. In light of this proven record of success, the question is, why isn't America there yet? While recent developments in the U.S. illustrate that we are finally moving in the right direction, on April 25th, 2014, the first regional earthquake early warning system was launched in the United States. The system is a private-public partnership between Imperial County and Seismic Warning Systems, and also the USGS and a coalition of universities are currently developing an earthquake early warning system for the western United States. The research is funded by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and the USGS. We simply aren't there. I have had deep concerns for a number of years over the breadth of responsibility and lack of focus by the USGS. While the Obama administration has expanded many of the programs at USGS over the last few years, touching on issues such as climate change a century from now, the lack of focus and investment in early warning for earthquakes that can strike at any moment is a deep concern. I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to hearing their thoughts on earthquake early warning system in the United States. I would now like to recognize Representative DeFazio, the ranking member of the full committee, for his statement. Okay, Representative Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also, as I'd like to say, thank you for holding this hearing on an issue that is such critically important to my district, which kind of straddles both Los Angeles County and Orange County, and of critical importance to the entire state of California. A little over 81 years ago, on March 11th of 1933, the deadliest earthquake in Southern California history occurred, with its epicenter just a few miles from the city of Long Beach. Actually, my house that I live in today fell over in that earthquake and had to be lifted up. Although the quake was not that strong, only a 6.4 magnitude, over 100 people were killed, and largely because of that construction that was simply not built to withstand that kind of shaking. We had all of that, which ultimately, as I will point out, led to some of the construction. This right here is Jefferson Junior High School in Long Beach, and that's what took place in that earthquake. As you can see, it was totally devastated. Another one that we have is the John Muir School, which is just a few miles away from here. You can see just what took place in that earthquake also in 1933. Thankfully, the earthquake occurred when students were not in session, so that we were spared even greater loss. So we would have lost hundreds, if not thousands, of students. But that event shook California into taking action, and we passed in California then the Field Act, which mandated that all public schools be built to withstand earthquakes. It was one of the first pieces of legislation in the country to require common sense precautions to mitigate the danger from earthquake, and it worked. No public school built to the requirements of the Field Act has collapsed from an earthquake since that bill was passed over 80 years ago. When we prepare, lives are saved. It may cost a little extra to build a school that can survive a major earthquake, but if our children are at that school, those costs are well worth it. An earthquake early warning system is just another common sense investment that can save lives and mitigate damages, if we just have the foresight and the will to make it happen. This is not new, as the chairman pointed out. The early warning technology is not science fiction. Japan, Mexico, Turkey, China, Romania all have earthquake early warning systems that can give the public up to a minute of warning before the earth begins to shake. A minute may not sound like much, but even a few seconds can give people time to find the safest place in their home or workplace, to pause a surgery, or to get out of an elevator, avoid crossing a bridge. And automated systems can work even faster, slowing down trains to reduce the risk of derailments, shutting down natural gas pipelines or nuclear plants, and placing critical manufacturing equipment into the safe mode. Other countries have made this investment necessary to ensure that their citizens have these opportunities. The United States, however, has not. The U.S. Geological Survey reports that setting up an early warning system on the entire West Coast would cost $38 million to get started, and then $16 million each year in annual operating costs. Frankly, Mr. Chair, and relative to the federal budget, this is peanuts. And when compared to the potential devastation that the next major earthquake will cause, this is an investment with an excellent return. And yet the USGS has only spent approximately $10 million since 2006, barely more than $1 million a year, on developing such an earthquake early warning system. It should not be surprising then that Turkey, Romania, and even Mongolia have public early warning systems while we do not. But this is not the fault of the U.S. Geological Survey. They and their partners like Caltech and UC Berkeley have made tremendous progress with the money they have received and have established a small-scale test system that is up and running in California. But that system still needs more work, and it is not ready to provide alerts to the general public. No, the reason that the people of California and the entire West Coast cannot get advance notice of earthquakes is the fault of Congress, which has not provided the funding necessary to get the system up and running. Just last month, the congressionally created Scientific Earthquake Studies Advisory Committee submitted a report to Congress which explains that the USGS earthquake budget is already overstretched and that trying to fully implement an early warning system in Southern California would, quote, overextend current USGS resources. I agree. That's why I joined over 24 of my colleagues, House colleagues, in April in a letter to the Appropriations Committee asking them to provide the money needed to establish an earthquake early warning system along the West Coast. We may not know exactly when the next major earthquake is going to hit, but we know that it is coming. We don't need to wait until the devastation to know that an earthquake early warning system is an idea whose time has come. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back my time.
Representative DeFazio.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for returning to this important subject after your first hearing on the 50th anniversary of the quake in Alaska. I won't repeat what my colleague from California said, but it's pretty darn pathetic when countries like Romania, Mexico, and now Mongolia are doing more to protect their citizens and severe damage in the case of an earthquake than the United States of America. Oh, I know, we're broke, we can't afford it, we can't afford $30 million. Come on. You're going to save lives and avoid a heck of a lot more in terms of costs for rebuilding that'll be paid for by borrowed money through FEMA if we invest in the system. We need two systems on the West Coast. We need a system that's land-based, which is, as has been described earlier, capable of giving an early warning. Now, in the case of the Northwest, they estimate that the quake will start southerly and move north. That could mean the people in Portland might have 2 or 3 minutes warning to shut down the MAX system, to shut down critical manufacturing, to get people to safe places. That's a lot of time if you have a system, and if it goes to people's cell phones, and if it goes to other alert systems, and if it's automated to close the bridges and get people off the bridges, because we have some, particularly one I-5 bridge, which is going to go when we have a big quake. And then after we get the land-based system, which would cost, gee, $30, $40 million. That's as much money as the federal government spends in, what, 10 minutes? But we can't afford it with this dysfunctional Congress. Then we need to focus on a seabed system, which will have multiple uses, but the most important of which will be potential early detection. Now, they found out in Japan that they had seismometers on the ocean floor, but they weren't connected. They weren't real time. But when they retrieved them after the extraordinary earthquake, they had a 7, then a few days later, the major quake, they found that there was a lot of slow slip earthquake activity going on. So you could essentially, with a sophisticated offshore system, have something like Homeland Security uses, and I don't even know what colors they use anymore. I used to be in that committee. But the point is, everything's great, it's green. It would never be green because we could have a very quick, sharp shake in the West with these particular faults. But it would be sort of a normal day-to-day, observe normal procedures. But if we had this ocean-based system, we'd say, wow, there's some really pretty big slow slip activity and other stuff going on here, which now we don't know about, and move it up to a yellow or something like that and say, people should be ready over the next few days for a quick warning. You might even have some very critical infrastructure in Japan. Had they known that, they might have shut down some of those nuclear plants and not had the catastrophe they had. So if we had that system, we could potentially save phenomenal assets and lives. That would be very expensive. That would be as much money as the Pentagon spends in 12 hours. Whew, we can't afford that, can we? In order to prevent the saving of, to provide for the saving of thousands of lives, tens of billions of dollars in damage, we can't afford 12 hours spending at the Pentagon around here. This is beyond the point of absurdity. It's becoming essentially negligent to the point of being criminal. These systems exist. The technology exists. We just don't have the will to put them out there. Now, there's a really, just recommend one last thing to people. There's a great video. You can see it on YouTube. And it was in a television studio in Mexico. Now, this is a land-based system. And it's a guy, an announcer on TV, just doing the evening news, and all of a sudden he starts talking really fast. And lights start flashing, and like alarms are going off, and you go, wow, I wonder what this is. But he just keeps talking. He's talking faster and faster. My Spanish isn't very good. I couldn't follow it very well. But what he was doing was he was telling people, there has been an earthquake. You have time. Get to a safe place now. And it goes on. He's talking for a long time. You watch and you're going, wow, gee, I guess he's not where the earthquake is. No, about a minute to, I think, a minute and 15 seconds later, suddenly everything in the studio starts falling down, and the earth, you can see that's pretty darn dramatic, what just a land-based system would do, let alone a sea-based system, in the potential for averting catastrophe. With that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing from these witnesses, and like Mr. Lowenthal, I don't blame USGS. Their budget is totally inadequate, and it's up to the Congress and the President to get this done.
We will now hear from our witnesses. I'd like to invite forward Dr. Bill Leith, Senior Science Advisor for Earthquake and Geologic Hazards for the U.S. Geological Survey, Mr. John Schelling, Interim Mitigation and Recovery Section Manager for the Washington State Emergency Management Division, Dr. Douglas Toomey, Professor of Geophysics, the University of Oregon, Dr. Richard Allen, Director of the Berkeley Seismological Laboratory, the University of California at Berkeley, and Mr. John McPartland, Member of the Board of Directors of the Bay Area Regional Transit. Like all of our witnesses, your written testimony will appear in full in the hearing record, so I ask that you keep your oral statements to 5 minutes. Our microphones are not automatic, so you need to turn them on when you are ready to begin. I would also like to explain how our timing lights work. When you begin to speak, our clerk will start the timer and a green light will appear. After 4 minutes, a yellow light will appear, and at that time, you should begin to conclude your statement. At 5 minutes, the red light will come on. You may complete your statement, but at that time I must ask that you stop. Dr. Leith, you may begin.
Chairman Lamborn, members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss earthquake early warning. The U.S. Geological Survey has worked closely with our state, university, and private sector partners to develop the current pilot system, which holds great promise for protecting
Sir,
lives.
if you could bring the microphone just a little bit closer, thanks.
Is that better? Great. So we've worked closely with our state, university, and private sector partners to develop the current pilot system, which holds great promise for protecting lives, livelihood, and prosperity in the future. The earthquake risk in the United States is well known. A single large event could cause thousands of deaths and tens of thousands of injuries from the shaking alone, and much more from possible resulting fires and other hazards. 3/4 of this risk is concentrated on the West Coast, but the impact of a major West Coast earthquake will be felt by the entire country and the rest of the world. A number of military installations, as well as 5 of the 10 busiest ports in the United States, are along the West Coast. The 2 busiest ports are in Southern California, in the heart of the earthquake threat. If those ports suffer significant damage, imports and exports and the businesses that depend on them would be seriously threatened. We at the USGS are proud of our long history of reducing the impacts of earthquakes to the nation by translating our science into practical applications. Our science is used before earthquakes to set insurance rates, develop building codes, and design resilience into critical infrastructure. It's also used after earthquakes to estimate losses and inform emergency response and recovery decisions. Now, the USGS, with our university partners and support from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, have developed a pilot project to demonstrate an important new technology, earthquake early warning, that can detect earthquakes and send alerts so quickly that people and systems can take protective actions before damaging shaking arrives. We call this capability Shake Alert. Earthquake early warning works because earthquake waves travel more slowly than information can be sent out through modern communication systems. It's therefore possible for electronic devices, such as smartphones and automated systems, to receive an alert that allows an action to avert or minimize damage and injury. Shake Alert is built on the existing earthquake monitoring capabilities of the USGS Advanced National Seismic System. The long-term goal of the project is to issue Shake Alerts wherever the ANSS structure is sufficiently developed. However, the USGS recognizes that the earthquake early warning must compete for finite budget resources, and funding this new effort must compete with existing USGS programs and DOI programs for budget. Recently, we published a technical implementation plan outlining our strategy for moving Shake Alert from a demonstration to full operation and provide alerts to the public and businesses on the west coast of the United States. The plan calls for adding more sensors, hardening data and alert communications, and rigorously testing the system to ensure its reliability. The plan also lays out how the system would be managed, outlines opportunities for private partnerships, and estimates the cost of building and operating the system. Mr. Chairman, as you noted, several other countries have built systems in response to devastating earthquakes, including the one in Mexico that provided 71 seconds of warning following the magnitude 7.2 earthquake that occurred there this spring. Japan's public system allows every person to receive an advanced alert of earthquake shaking coming from the Japan Meteorological Agency. No trains derailed in the 2011 magnitude 9 earthquake, primarily because of earthquake early warning. A final example, earthquake early warning has also paid off for Japanese businesses. For example, a Japanese computer chip manufacturer suffered $15 million in losses from fire equipment damage and 30 days lost productivity from 2 earthquakes in 2003. The firm then spent $600,000 on earthquake early warning, structural improvements to their business, and the repositioning of sensitive equipment. Since then, 2 earthquakes have struck of nearly the same size, this same area, and have caused just $200,000 in losses and only 8 days lost productivity. You can find further details in my written statement, and so with that, I'll thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to provide the subcommittee with the department's views on this subject, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you for your statement, Doctor, and thank you for the good work that you're doing. Mr. Schelling.
Good morning, Chairman Lamborn and members of the subcommittee. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning about new advances in earthquake science and technology. These advances will help mitigate the impacts to life, safety, private industry, and our economy before, during, and after our nation's next earthquake. I'm John Schelling from the Washington Emergency Management Division. Earthquake early warning systems around the world provide timely notification within a brief but critical window of opportunity to populations in an area that is projected to experience shaking. This important notification triggers a myriad of protective safety actions in seconds. The USGS and its Advanced National Seismic System currently give emergency managers and the public useful products that assist in disaster preparedness and response. Such a system, earthquake early warning, can be integrated into this suite of products as another invaluable tool for life safety, public and private sector mitigation, and community recovery after an earthquake. And such a system will actually minimize the amount of response resources necessary following an earthquake because of its potential to reduce or even eliminate some damaging impacts such as fires caused by the earthquake itself. The west coast of the United States faces hazards similar to that of Japan and other countries around the Pacific Rim. This means our coastal populations face a dual threat, a preceding magnitude 9+ earthquake followed by a 30 to 65-foot tsunami in some areas. In a best-case scenario, the implementation of an earthquake early warning system along the West Coast could provide 3 to 5 minutes of additional lead time for coastal evacuation before the first earthquake waves even arrive. In a situation such as this where seconds count, this investment will save lives. One of the most significant components of an end-to-end earthquake early warning system will not be technology, but public education. I think of this essentially as training, and it will be needed on a consistent and continuing basis. The implementation of this system should also not be considered in isolation. Coastal areas that receive tsunami alerts from NOAA's tsunami warning centers may also receive an earthquake early warning alert. This means that NOAA and USGS must continue to coordinate closely. This will ensure beachgoers and coastal residents know precisely what protective measures to take when they receive an alert, an earthquake alert, a tsunami alert, or both. Benefits of an earthquake early warning system are numerous. Examples include elevators that will stop in their nearest floor and open doors, suspension of work to avoid injury in hazardous workplaces. People will receive notification at home or at work so they can protect themselves. Suspension or initiation of financial or critical data transfers and retention of critical data. But one of the most exciting potentials for earthquake early warning is the participation of the private sector in creating value-added products specifically for industry and the public. A USGS standardized platform of earthquake early warning data can provide the broad opportunity for private sector innovation in the same way that government support of communication satellites has done for GPS technology. Washington State, like many other states, is striving to improve its resiliency, so the effects of an earthquake on our infrastructure and economy will not be catastrophic. However, a significant component of community resiliency is ensuring that residents and businesses feel safe enough to stay after an earthquake occurs. Learning from colleagues in Japan, their earthquake early warning system was instrumental in helping residents and survivors cope with aftershock sequences during the year following the March 2011 earthquake. Even a few seconds of warning for an aftershock gave them a sense of control, and providing a community with some predictability in an unpredictable situation can be empowering. It will greatly assist with short and long-term recovery so that residents will continue to live and thrive in their communities and provide the capital necessary for rapid restoration. It's also important to note that an earthquake early warning system does not preclude the need for earthquake or tsunami mitigation. Providing warnings to occupants of seismically dangerous buildings will be of little value if the building collapses. One of the challenges that states like Washington are facing is the shortened performance period of FEMA's hazard mitigation and pre-disaster mitigation grant programs. By reducing the amount of time available for applicants to complete mitigation projects, it essentially eliminates any type of structural seismic retrofitting to improve life safety of a building. And one last note, states are already feeling the direct effect and loss of funding from FEMA's State Earthquake Assistance Program due to a lapse in authorization of the National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Program, or NEHRP. They're concerned annually about proposed cuts to NOAA's Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program in the absence of a reauthorization of TWIA. While beneficial, an earthquake early warning system should not be implemented at the expense of hazard education and preparedness activities. And as Congress continues to deliberate on the reauthorization of NEHRP and TWIA, I hope you will consider the value that earthquake early warning and these critical programs add to enhancing public safety and reducing unnecessary impacts to our economy, protecting property, and the environment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Toomey.
Good morning, Chairman Lamburn, Ranking Member Holt, Congressman DeFazio, and committee members. I want to thank the chairman and all the members of the committee for the opportunity to submit testimony on a West Coast earthquake early warning system, as well as for your leadership in holding this hearing. I am Douglas Toomey, a professor of geophysics at the University of Oregon. I lead the Cascadia Initiative, a 4-year project funded by the National Science Foundation that features the largest array of onshore, offshore seismometers in U.S. history. Today, I will emphasize the unique opportunities for an earthquake early warning system in the Pacific Northwest. A magnitude 9 earthquake and tsunami, comparable to those that occurred in Alaska in 1964, Sumatra in 2004, Chile in 2010, and Japan in 2011, has and will again hit the Pacific Northwest. The source of this devastating earthquake will be the Cascadia subduction zone, which lies offshore beneath the coastal areas of Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. It's been more than 300 years since the last great earthquake and tsunami along Cascadia, and we're in the window of its reoccurrence. The Pacific Northwest is unprepared for catastrophe of this scale. Moreover, because the Cascadia fault zone lies offshore, we do not understand it as well as onshore faults, which can be monitored through easy and relatively inexpensive means. An earthquake early warning system is well suited for the impending magnitude 9 earthquake on the Pacific Northwest coast. This is because the most powerful earthquakes in the Pacific Northwest occur along a fault that lies primarily offshore as opposed to directly beneath major metropolitan areas. Given the immense length of this fault, if it were to begin rupturing in the south, as research indicates, Portland could receive a warning as much as 3 minutes, and Seattle as much as 5 minutes, prior to the arrival of heavy shaking. Even in Eugene, Oregon, where I live, our schools, businesses, and hospitals could be warned by as much as 2 minutes before the shaking starts. 2 minutes is a long time. I asked the principal of a local elementary school, which was built in 1926, how long it would take to evacuate all 350 students. The answer, 1.5 minutes. This is just one of 1,000 schools that a recent State of Oregon study concluded would collapse in a magnitude 9 event. Only a West Coast earthquake early warning system can provide advanced warnings that will save lives, protect businesses, and facilitate a more rapid recovery for local communities, the federal government, and the economy as a whole. To further drive home just how unprepared the Pacific Northwest is, consider the map being projected. The map shows seismic stations operated by the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. Observe the near absence of earthquake monitoring sites within the large red circle encompassing southwestern Oregon. If we presume that the next massive earthquake in the Cascadia subduction zone begins in northern California and unzips to the north, then it is obvious that our current capacity to detect earthquakes in this crucial region is woefully inadequate for protecting society. Once an onshore earthquake early warning system is built, it must be extended offshore. Studies in the wake of the recent magnitude 9 earthquakes in Japan and Chile show increasing evidence that subduction zones, like Cascadia, shimmy, sometimes for days and even weeks before they shake. To investigate this, scientists are deploying ocean bottom seismometers directly above subduction zone faults. The NSF-supported Cascadia Initiative, for example, has deployed hundreds of seismometers along the coast of the Pacific Northwest. These seismometers form the potential backbone of an offshore earthquake early warning system, but the current method of retrieving data, which is done by ship once per year, is impractical for that purpose. If seafloor cables attach the seismometers, they could provide real-time, near-field monitoring of the Cascadia subduction zone. By altering the function of instruments that are already in place on the ocean floor, we can fundamentally transform our ability to monitor Cascadia. In the event of a magnitude 9 earthquake, cabled ocean bottom seismometers will increase the warning time and make earthquake and tsunami warnings more accurate. Cabled ocean bottom seismometers will also accelerate discovery by allowing scientists to better monitor the creaks and groans that occur prior to catastrophic failure. Once again, Mr. Chairman and the committee, I thank you for your leadership on this vital issue.
Thank you. Dr. Allen.
Chairman Langborn, Ranking Member Holt, members of the committee, thank you for this invitation to testify at this hearing about bringing earthquake early warning to the population of the United States. As we've heard, the earthquake risk along the US West Coast is substantial, and it is too easily forgotten. We must remain vigilant and push forward with new and improved ways to reduce this risk, and earthquake early warning presents one such opportunity. I am the director of the UC Berkeley Seismological Laboratory and a professor of Earth and Planetary Science. Over the last decade, my research group has been developing earthquake early warning capabilities with colleagues from other universities across the United States. We now see a clear opportunity to take the next step in earthquake mitigation. What is needed is definitive action by policymakers. Earthquake early warning is a proven technology. An alert was issued in Japan before the shaking started in the magnitude 9 Tohoku-oki earthquake. Trains were stopped, manufacturing was paused, school children took cover underneath their desks. The overall impact of the earthquake was reduced as a result. In a recent survey in Japan, 90% of people said that they thought earthquake early warning is useful. Mexico City has a warning system and typically receives about 60 seconds of warning prior to large subduction zone earthquakes, including the recent magnitude 7.2 earthquake. These warnings are routine. China, Taiwan, Turkey, and Romania, as we've heard, also have warning systems in place. The US does not. We need to fix this. The Berkeley Seismological Laboratory is part of the California Integrated Seismic Network. It's a statewide collaboration with the California Institute of Technology, the California Emergency Management Agency, the California Geologic Survey, and of course the US Geologic Survey. With my colleagues in these institutions, we've been developing and testing a statewide earthquake early warning system since 2006, and this is the system that we now call Shake Alert. Shake Alert has been issuing alerts in California in a demonstration mode for about 2 years at this point. The alerts currently go out to a group of test users that includes the Bay Area Rapid Transit, BART, we'll hear from them momentarily, Metrolink, Caltrans, Google, Amgen, Southern California Edison, and several other private sector companies. It also goes to departments of emergency management for the cities of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Ontario, Riverside County, and of course the state emergency services office as well. In the recent Anza earthquake, it provided 40 seconds of warning in Los Angeles. In another small earthquake near the epicenter of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, it provided 24 seconds of warning to San Francisco and Oakland, meaning that in a repeat of the Loma Prieta earthquake, we would get about 24 seconds of warning. For the really big magnitude 8 earthquakes in California, it could provide up to a minute of warning, and as we've heard, for earthquakes in Oregon and Washington, there could be even more warning. We are now ready to leverage the existing federal investments in our seismic and GPS networks to deliver a robust public early warning system that will provide warnings to the residents of California, Oregon, and Washington. Built within the framework of the Advanced National Seismic System, the ANSS, this capability could then be rolled out nationwide as appropriate. This will save lives, and it will reduce the financial losses of future earthquakes. Already, BART uses the warning system to slow and stop trains, potentially saving hundreds of lives and preventing derailments in an earthquake. The USGS is the federal agency with the responsibility for issuing alerts, but as seen in Japan, there is a critical role for the private sector and also a business opportunity for them. As outlined in the implementation plan that the USGS has developed with its partners, this system could be operational in 2 years. The cost of building and operating a West Coast warning system for the first 5 years is about $120 million. It would then cost $16 million per year to operate, in addition to the current spending on the ANSS. By comparison, preventing one BART train from derailing will save about $30 million, and that is just the value of the train. The earthquake threat along the US West Coast increases every day as the strain builds on our faults. It is not if, but when will the next earthquake strike. We are due for an earthquake in multiple locations along the West Coast, which is why we should build a West Coast-wide system. It is my belief that if there was an earthquake today, that we would build this system tomorrow. So I propose we should not miss this opportunity, and we should move ahead with this opportunity, with this capability. I would like to thank the committee for its consideration of this important issue.
Thank you, Mr. McPartland.
Thank you, Chairman Lamborn and members of the committee for having the opportunity to speak to you today. I will be speaking on the significance of early earthquake warning for the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District. And I have, first of all, we have had earthquake early warning activated and operating since August of 2012 in cooperation with Dr. Allen and Cal. I have a strong background in public safety. Specifically, I'm a retired battalion chief from the Metropolitan Department, City of Oakland, former member of the FEMA Urban Search and Rescue, still a member of Health and Human Services Disaster Medical Assistance Team, and a member of an Emergency Management Association in my county. I have taught emergency management and response at the local, state, and federal level and internationally with civil military operations in 2 different countries. And by the way, I'm a retired Army Reserve colonel. The emergency responses that I have personally participated and responded to include the Northridge and Loma Prieta earthquake, as well as Hurricane Katrina. Early earthquake warning for BART has 2 critical aspects. The first one is to slow or to stop trains and prevent, and the second one is going to be to basically participate in emergency support and recovery.
Mr. McPartland, if you could pause for just a second, we'll pause the clock. If you hear that buzzer, it's a flash flood warning that we're getting, and over the loudspeakers. I think that's very interesting. It shows we do have the technology, don't we? We do have the technology. Okay, back to you.
Back to me. That's great. It's working. The first of these aspects is going to be to slow or stop trains in the event of an earthquake and prevent injuries. And the second one will be to participate in disaster support and recovery. On the first end, as far as slowing and stopping train, life safety is our primary issue that we want to be able to protect. There is absolutely no way to predict exactly at what threshold we will be able to prevent derailments. But obviously, the faster the train is going, the more potential we will end up having for the derailment. The reason it cannot be predicted is because it would depend upon the direction of the quake, which way it is coming, whether it's parallel to the line of travel or perpendicular to it, whether the train is on a slope, whether it's on a turn, and precipitation. And so there's really no way to predict that other than the faster train is going to have a potential for derailment. And we find ourselves in a position where in the San Francisco Bay Area, we service a population of over 6 million people. The Bay Area Rapid Transit provides transportation for nearly 500,000 people per day. During peak periods, we are running 65 trains, many of them with 10 cars each, and many of them with 100 persons per car. If you could visualize the idea of taking a bus with 100 people standing on and sitting on it and run it off the road and then slam on the brakes, you can imagine the amount of soft tissue injuries potentially that we could have with those kinds of people. Can we end up having deaths associated with that? Yes. As a matter of fact, in December of last year, a New York train derailed at 82 miles an hour. There were approximately 100 people on the train. 4 of them died. 63 were critically injured. 63 were injured, and 13 of those were critically injured. In the event of a major earthquake, if you could imagine that the entire inhabitants of that train would be on one car of a 10-car train, and at peak transportation periods, we have 65 trains on the road. 40 to 45 of those will be going at 70 miles an hour. And I only have 57 seconds left. Wow. Moving right along. Second issue associated with this is going to be that we have invested $1.2 billion that, in an earthquake retrofit program that will enable us to be able to have a solid system that still works after the collapse of the entire infrastructure, and we can move people 1,000 at a time. Because we end up doing that per train every day during the commute. Imagine what it's going to be like when we have 20 or 30 derailed trains, not to mention the impact of those patients that we would have associated with that. If you end up having a derailed train, then the use of that retrofit is going to be absolutely of no good as far as the ability to evacuate persons out and get resources in, and I made it.
You can do a lot in a minute, and and once again, that goes to how 57 seconds of warning can make a huge difference.
Precisely.
As you all have said, it can save lives if we were in an earthquake alert system. Boy, it's so obvious to me we have to find the money to do this. Whether it's federal dollars, whether it's public-private partnerships, whether it's an appeal to civic-minded charitable organizations, we have to find the money for this. And I might disagree with the ranking member over where the federal funds should come from. I, for instance, wouldn't want to go after our national defense. I'd rather look at other programs. But still, I think the impulse is the same. We have to find the money, wherever that should be. Dr. Leith, I'd like to ask you a background question. I'm assuming that seismic waves radiate outward from the epicenter so that if those who are directly over the epicenter would get no warning at all. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, there's a zone directly above the earthquake that was often referred to as the blind zone, where it takes a couple of seconds to process the data being recorded, and you only have a couple of seconds between the first wave and the damaging wave.
But the farther out you are, obviously, the more warning you would get, and that's what this is intended for.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
As relates to the USGS, how much federal funds have you spent on the pilot program that you're involved with? Not grant dollars or any outside dollars, but federal funds.
Yes, we've spent a little bit more than $10 million over the course of about a decade to complete the research and development and build the pilot test system that's in place now.
Okay, thank you. Now for you or Dr. Allen or Mr. McPartland, in 2013, the California State Legislature passed legislation requiring a consortium of academic institutions, state agencies, and the USGS to deploy a statewide early earthquake warning system. The legislature did not authorize any resources from the general fund, but required that the system be a public-private partnership. How is that working out since that law was passed in 2013?
Maybe I can speak to that. So as you point out, while the law was passed mandating that the state should have a warning system, no funding was allocated. Today, the state currently spends about $2 million per year to help run the seismic networks across the state. The USGS, of course, also contributes to running those seismic networks. So right now, there's actually nothing in place from the state of California to build an early warning system. There is a process in place where the various partners are trying to figure out the best path forward. Following that, there is the intention to try and identify a source of funding, but there is currently no funding for the warning system.
And are there charitable organizations, we may ask more about this in more detail, but are there charitable organizations that have expressed interest?
So right now, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation have invested $6.5 million in the development of the early warning system. Their focus has been on completing the research that was necessary in order to roll out or to develop a blueprint for a public early warning system. So that is by far the most significant contribution at this point.
So it sounds like these projects are still in the research phase and not in the deployment phase. Is that correct?
I would say that's not correct. The research has been done. We have demonstrated the capability to issue alerts. For example, there have been 3 smaller magnitude earthquakes in the Los Angeles area over the course of the last few months that were felt widely across the region. And in all 3 cases, an alert was pushed out, and the majority of people living in Los Angeles who felt those earthquakes could have received a warning if the public warning system was in place. So yes, it's true that research goes on, and I think it's appropriate that research would continue into the future, so we are always improving our system, but the system is ready to implement now.
And Dr. Leith, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree No, I agree with Dr. Allen's assessment. That's where we are. The research is in a very mature stage. We have a test system operating that's issuing alerts now and has been for nearly 2.5 years.
And the test pilot system you're talking about is on land, not offshore.
That's correct.
And Dr. Allen, these 3 events that you're referring to in the last few months, I take it they were not of any high magnitude number. They were just strong enough to be felt, so that they didn't cause any serious damage?
That's exactly right. 2 of them were magnitude 4s, 4.1, 4.3 as I recall, and the larger one was a magnitude 5.1. So we don't expect any damage from those earthquakes because, of course, we build the buildings so that they can withstand shaking, and we should always do that. But they were widely felt, and the way that the system operates, it still allows us to test the system, demonstrate the system, and to have a good understanding of the kind of warning times that would be available if it was to be a larger damaging earthquake in the same location.
Okay, thank you, and thank all of you for being here today. Representative Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that point that you made about congratulating them for setting up the early system, that was in my district, and so And I'd like to, before I begin, to also thank the cities of Long Beach, the city of Los Angeles, the University of California at Berkeley, Caltech, and the USGS in testing this prototype earthquake early warning system, which you have identified as Shake Alert. Long Beach and Los Angeles are going to be beta sites for testing the system and providing feedback so that we're able to refine the software and the communication systems of Shake Alert. I'm happy to see the cities take a lead, and I hope we gain valuable information for when we are able to deploy this system. And at this point, before I ask questions, I would like to enter into the record, Mr. Chair, a letter from the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, regarding the earthquake early warning system.
Seeing no objections, so ordered.
Thank you. Dr. Lath, at our last earthquake hearing in March, you testified that USGS has spent about $10 million over the past decade to develop earthquake early warning systems. What have we achieved with that money, and how does that compare to investments in other types of earthquake programs that are funded by USGS, and how does it compare to what other countries, if you can answer that question also, are expending on early warning systems?
Yes, as I mentioned, for the development of the test system that's in operation now, we've spent about $10 million, and the Moore Foundation has spent an additional $6 million. That's allowed the test system to go through almost all of the research for an onshore system, and we're ready to put that system into public operation, but it needs an expansion, for example, additional seismic stations in the areas of southern Oregon that would better service the Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco areas, hardening of communications, and so on.
How does this compare to what USGS is spending on other earthquake programs?
We spend the U.S. operates a national seismic network, global seismographic network, and regional seismic networks, which is a major part of our spending. About 45% of the federal funds that we expend is to monitor earthquakes now. Our other major flagship project is the National Seismic Hazard Maps. These maps are the basis for building codes. In the United States, there's about $1 trillion in new construction every year, and the seismic provisions of building codes guide that construction so that it is less vulnerable to earthquakes. We spend on the order of about $10 million a year on hazard assessment work that feeds the national building codes, and the other part of our program is research, which feeds that also.
I'm not sure if this question, the last part, either goes to you, Dr. Lath, or to Dr. Allen. What are other countries spending? We've mentioned some of these other countries. Do we have any understanding about just how much these systems are costing other places?
I know that following the Kobe earthquake in Japan, which is when Japan decided to move forward with an early warning system, I believe they spent about $600 million to deploy the seismic network and do the necessary development that led to them having a public warning system which started operation in 2007. Right now, China is also putting a lot of effort into developing earthquake early warning following the large number of fatalities in the Wenqian earthquake. I don't know how much they're spending in that particular case.
Yeah, pardon? The question I'm wondering is, you mentioned 600 million in Japan. We're not talking about anything like that on the West Coast. What are they getting that we're not getting?
So I think that an important thing to recognize is that already the federal government is investing heavily in very high quality seismic networks.
Oh, the ANSS?
Meaning the ANSS, exactly. And so the West Coast already has significant seismic instrumentation in place, and the proposal in the USGS implementation plan for early warning is building on top of that capability. So while the total cost of building it and operating it for 5 years is $120 million, that's in addition to the current spending, and that's building on the investment that's already been made.
Can you explain to us on the committee just exactly what we have in place in the ANSS? So, because what you're saying is that that system will be expanded, or this will be part I believe, of that system.
Sure, I can speak to California, and perhaps some of my colleagues can speak to the rest. In California, right now, there are almost 3,000 seismic stations that are operating. There are various generations and various technologies. The instruments that we can actually use in the early warning system is about 400 of those seismic stations. And so the demonstration system that we run today, that is statewide in California, uses 400 seismic stations.
Dr. Lath?
So the Advanced National Seismic System development over the last 15 years has been based on a plan which was requested by Congress and delivered in 1999. It calls nationwide for the for the development of a network of 7,100 seismic stations, and their real-time communications and 24/7 operations, both at the National Earthquake Information Center and at regional centers. We're about 38% complete in the implementation of that program, and right now USGS supports the operation nationally of about a little more than 2,700 modern seismic stations that would be capable of supporting an earthquake early warning system. About 38% complete.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Toomey, if the resources were available to build the cables to provide real-time data across a fault zone, how long roughly would that take?
That's going to take longer than the onshore system. The onshore system, as we've heard earlier, is ready to go almost immediately if the funding is available. The National Science Foundation is funding the Ocean Observatories Initiative, and together the U.S. scientists and Canadian scientists are laying cable off the shore of the Pacific Northwest. It's rather limited. And so this is something that's happening in the past couple of years. To install a system that would provide earthquake early warning on the West Coast is something that's really a decadal scale effort. It would be much more extensive than either the NSF-supported Ocean Observatories Initiative or what Neptune Canada is doing presently.
Have you done enough research into it to know what type of permits would be required and from what agencies to be able to get the work completed?
I can ask my colleagues about that and get back to you on that particular question.
Okay. If the resources were made available that would help move this project along, what type of structure would be most important and why?
What type of facilities or structure would be most important? Well, you know, primarily if you want to have real-time monitoring offshore, and there's a number of reasons why you would like to do that beyond earthquakes, you have to have connectivity, and that's a seafloor cable. And what that cable provides is data transmission and power, and you can provide power to all sorts of instrumentation, both seismic sensors, but also autonomous instruments. The laying of cable is somewhat routine. I think what we're challenged with right now is how to hook up the scientific sensors to that. And so I think the science community is ready to respond to that in terms of providing facilities to hook up the cables. But, you know, first of all, you have to put the cable on the seafloor.
What's my last question to you? What is the current cost to operate the system? When you collect the data that you have right now, and you go back through and you relook at it once a year, what's the cost that we're having, and how much cost would this add to operate it yearly?
Let's make sure I understand the question. You're asking when we're doing something like the Cascadia Initiative and we're deploying seismometers, going out and collecting those and coming back. Over roughly the 4 or 5 year time scale, the Cascadia Initiative, including personnel cost and ship cost, et cetera, it's about a $30 million project funded by the National Science Foundation. That doesn't yet include the cost of scientific analysis. That particular data set, it's actually quite unique in the sense it's a community experiment, and it's available to everyone right now around the globe. Roughly 400 individual scientists from the global scientific community are looking at Cascadia data and looking at processes in the Pacific Northwest. There'll be a cost associated with that to provide, you know, funding for scientific analysis. But overall, that 4-year experiment to go out and collect the data and bring it back is roughly about $30 million.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I want to thank each of the witnesses for being here today. This is a very vital issue. I appreciate the time you've given us and the answer to our questions and for your testimony. Members of the committee may have additional questions for the record, and I would ask that you respond to those in writing if you receive any. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee is adjourned.